Hello there everyone, it's Lydia here and welcome to another edition of Lydia's Crafty Corner. So I'm going to be doing the molten metal technique with some heat embossing today. I have done this before, but I thought it'd be really cool to show it with these beautiful floral 3D layering dies. So the layering die set that I'm using is the Fantasy Floral die. So it's got 3 layers and also a couple of leaves in here as well. So firstly, I'm just going to cut these layers, all 3 of the layers for the flower, out of some white cardstock. I do cut them 3 times so I can do 3 flowers, and then I also cut the leaves separately at the end. I do 2 loads of the leaves as well. And you want to make sure that when you pop out all these pieces that you do get rid of the landlocked areas in there. I do find the easiest way to do this is with a little pin, or some of you may have a pokey tool that you'll be able to poke through the little holes on the dies just to gently release them from the die. So the paper will get gently released from the die. So I then cut, after I've cut the 3 flowers, so I've cut 3 layers for the 3 flowers, so 9 die cuts there, and then I've also cut the leaves. So to heat emboss these, I don't really want to be picking them up with my fingers because I will burn them. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add these to a little piece of washi tape. So it would be washi tape, painter's tape, purple tape, any tape that you can stick your little die cuts onto. I've just done it on the edge, so there's only a little bit on the tape and not a lot of the die cut itself. I'm then going to use some clear embossing ink. So this is the Molten embossing ink, which is really, really good. It's nice and thick and sticky, so it works really, really well. And I'm just going over the whole of the die cut. This is the base layer of the flower. Sorry, I should have mentioned that. And then I'm using the rose gold embossing powder from Molten. So I'm just adding the embossing powder over the whole of the die cuts, and it does stick really, really well because of that embossing ink that we've just put all over them. I'm then going to heat emboss them. So you want to make sure that your heat tool's nice and hot before you do start adding heat to your project pieces. And then once it's cooled down, I'm going to go over again with the ink, and I'm going to heat emboss this again with the rose gold embossing powder. So I'm doing this so it gives me a nice thick embossing, and it also really helps with the next bit that I'm going to do as well because it heats up really, really well. So the more layers of embossing powder you put on, the quicker it will melt into each other. So it really helps with this technique. So once I've heated that all up and it's nicely heated, I'm then going to use some of the platinum embossing powder. I've heated the piece again, and I'm just sprinkling a little bit of the platinum embossing powder into these flowers. So it's going to go straight into that nice warm embossing powder and melt. So it's going to give you a molten metal effect, and it's really cool, and you can get lots of different techniques with this and looks if you do switch out different colors of embossing powders that you do use. So I'm just going to do that, and then I'm going to go over with the embossing gun again just to make sure they're all nicely embossed together. I'm then going to remove it from the tape. You may want to go around the edge that was attached to the tape with your nail, and this will get rid of any of the embossing powder that is stuck over the edge. I'm then going to move on to the second layer, and I'm going to be using the antique gold for this. I'm going to be doing exactly the same technique for all of my die cuts. So firstly, I would ink it up with the embossing ink, add on my embossing powder. This time for the second layer is the antique gold, and then I will heat set this. I do find that using these coffee filters really helps me not make so much of a mess as well, so I can gently tip this back into the container so I'm not wasting any of that embossing powder. So once it's nicely cooled, I'm then going to ink it up again with the embossing ink, go over it again with the antique gold embossing powder and heat set it. Again, I'm going to heat it up again, and this time I'm sprinkling in a little bit of the copper embossing powder from Molten, and I do love how this layer turned out. I think you could definitely use that layer on its own on a card if you wanted to. I'm then going to use the third layer, so I'm just inking it up again. I have added it onto a piece of washi tape as before so I don't burn my little fingers, and this time I am using the copper embossing powder for most of the embossing on this layer. So I've waited till it had cooled before adding the second layer of embossing powder as well. So once I have done this, I'm then going to add a little bit of the antique gold into the center of that flower layer, and I do think that that really makes it pop. I'm then going to move on to the leaves, and I do these again in exactly the same way. Firstly, I'm going to ink it all up, and I am going to add on some antique silver embossing powder, and then for the bits that I sprinkle in at the end, I did use some platinum embossing powder for that. I'm then going to add all these pieces together. I wanted to add a little bit of dimension, so what I'm doing is I'm adding some foam tape, and I'm adding this onto the layer that's going to be above, and I'm adding it so you can't see any of the foam tape through the landlocked areas. You don't want to see any of this white foam tape through those holes, so I've made sure I've popped it on places that you won't be able to see it. So once I've added it on, I'm going to add it onto the first layer, and you can see how cool that looks. I really do think adding the foam tape really works well at making these pop a little bit more. So as you can see, I'm using really small pieces of foam tape for this layer because it does have little fiddly pieces, but I did manage to fit on 4 little pieces, so this is going to sit really, really well and stick to that second layer. So I'm just adding the foam tape on where you won't be able to see it from the top, removing the backing, which this one was a little bit tricky, but he does go on. He was quite happy. He sticks in the end, but he just didn't want to go on that first time. And then once I've removed this tape, I'm going to add that on to my second layer, and then that is the flower complete. I did this the same for all 3 of the flowers, so I have 3 of these flowers in the end. Once I've done that, I've moved them to the side. I'm then going to take a navy cardstock base, which I've made out of the navy cardstock, and I'm just going to add a sentiment. This is from the Ranunculus Builder flower, and I've just inked that up with some embossing ink, and I'm heat setting it using some antique silver embossing powder. Once I've done that, I did add some sprinkles using the antique silver spray ink, so I let that dry before I've adhered my flowers down with a little bit more of foam tape. So this card does have a little bit of dimension. Well, when I say a little bit, I mean a lot, but I really do like how it turned out. So for the leaves, I'm adding these down nice and flat, so I'm using the glue tape from Molten, sorry, and I'm adding it onto the leaves and just poking them beneath the flowers, and there is the card complete. I really do love how this card turned out. It's really, really cool. I love all the metal on there, how it looks like metal, even though it is embossing. I really do hope that you like the video and that you give this technique a try. I would love to see what that you do come up with as well. So again, thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you do want to watch any more videos, we have a couple of here for you to watch if you would like to. Also, if you don't want to miss out on anything that we do upload to the channel, it would be great if you do subscribe. Again and again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again really, really soon. Bye-bye.